Welcome to Lord and Richards Radio, a program that will enable you to become more financially independent and prosperous from a biblical point of view. Tune in each week to learn how to prosper through good markets and bad. Now, here's our host, Colin Richards, your biblical investment advisor.
Hi, friends. I'm glad to be with you today on Lord and Richards Radio. I'm Colin Richards, founder and president of Lord and Richards. We're a team of advisors who are dedicated to helping people just like you retire financially independent. And we're doing that every single day. On this show, we're discussing investing and planning from the perspective of key biblical principles, a little bit different way of looking at money. We also talk about how to use methods and strategies that will enable you to prosper through both up and down markets. And that's so important in today's volatile world. I'd love to chat with you. My team and I would love to help you, talk to you about your specific questions regarding retirement and saving and investing from a biblical point of view. Just pick up the phone and give us a call at 720-372-0400. Again, that's 720-372-0400. I'd love to chat with you about how you can achieve financial independence from a biblical point of view. Or just check us out on the web at lordandrichards.com. Hi, folks. This is Colin Richards, president and founder of Lord and Richards, and I'm once again excited to be with you on this episode of the Lord and Richards Show. And as you know, in talking to our audiences all over the country, whether in Denver, whether in Dallas, or throughout the country, we're discovering that people want to enjoy freedom in retirement. They want to enjoy a sense of being carefree. And so we have developed an approach called a biblically based retirement freedom. How to have a biblically based retirement that sets you free. We educate folks in public workshops here on radio and YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, in our published blogs. We are all about education. And as we talk to people, we're hearing similar themes day by day by day. We're discovering that folks are concerned that events out of your control are going to mess up your retirement. And so what we do here at Lord and Richards is we develop a retirement freedom review together with you to check on all the key areas of retirement. These are not the same areas that you're going over with a classic broker or financial or investment advisor. These are areas like healthcare planning, legacy planning, tax planning, income planning. When you finish meeting with a Lord and Richards advisor, me and my team, you will have a comprehensive plan to enjoy freedom in retirement. We are physically located in Highlands Ranch, but in the Denver area, and then also in Plano, Texas. But we're also virtually located anywhere in the country because, you know what, our clients are always moving around. They're always getting up and going, and sometimes their needs may occur while they're traveling overseas or they're relocating to another state. And so we're accessible and available to you as our clients all over the country, all over the world. So what do we mean when we say we want you to enjoy a biblically based retirement freedom? Well, I want to start with some foundational questions. So if we talk about retirement freedom, before we even get into the biblical principles, and as you know, here at Lord and Richards, we base our teaching not only on sound financial principles, but on eternal, timeless principles from the Word of God. And the question that I ask people, and my audiences in particular, is what do you really want? When you think of being free in retirement, free to do what? And I get all kinds of answers. People will raise their hands, or when we're sitting down in meetings, they'll just express things like, I would love to spend more time with my grandkids. You know, I have a great relationship with my grandkids. Now, that's not always the case. Some people don't have children or grandchildren. And so maybe other people say, oh, we want to travel. We have held off all these years, and it's finally time to get up and go. We want to travel. We want to have the freedom to do that. Fantastic. And then I've got other people who say, you know what? I traveled for my job my whole life. I'm just looking forward to hanging out on my deck in the backyard. Maybe we'll install a pergola, maybe one of those fancy ones where they kind of rotate and close if the rain comes. Whatever your joy, whatever your delight in retirement, that's what we consider retirement freedom. Freedom to do the things that you love with the people that you love that bring you meaning and purpose in life. And that's really what it all boils down to. Some of you grew up being taught that hierarchy of needs, right? That pyramid. What do people need foundationally? They need food. They need shelter. They need clothing, being insulated from the elements. They need safety, right? That's at the bottom. You can't even go forward until you've got that. And by the way, there are some corresponding principles in retirement where you can't even really enjoy yourself until you get some foundational things done. And we're going to teach you how to do that. But then as we move up that hierarchy, we discover that there are things that are higher purposes and higher needs within our life. And we start to talk about fulfillment, meaning, finding joy and purpose, love, relationships, happiness. These are the things that all those activities that our audiences raise their hand and tell us about are really pointing to, right? If you're going on a trip, it's because you want to be free and to be happy and to relax and have some downtime. If you're spending time with loved ones, that brings you purpose, joy, and fulfillment. Here's a biblical perspective on that. For those of us who share this common ground that says, hey, I want to base my life decisions around pleasing God and serving others, here's a great verse for you, 1 Peter 4:10. So the Apostle Peter wrote this in the New Testament. He says, as each of you has received a gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace. Isn't that wonderful, this idea that we really aren't owners of all that we've been entrusted with? Our portfolios and wealth, our real estate, our home, our cars, our talents, our time. If you're a Christian, if you've placed your faith in Christ, do you believe that those things are all subservient to God? Just as Jesus himself said, I only do the things that please the Father. And so Jesus himself saw his life as a stewardship, right? More so you and I. Because if we've presented ourselves, what the Bible calls in the book of Romans, a living sacrifice, right? Not a burnt up sacrifice, but a living one, then we owe it to God and to each other to use the things, the gifts, the abilities, the time, the treasure, the talent, as I like to say, to serve other people and be a good steward of God's varied grace, to dispense his grace everywhere we can. So this is a life of meaning, purpose, and fulfillment, and it's the kind of thing that I talk about when I refer to retirement freedom to really do the things that bring you that kind of meaning and fulfillment. Perhaps you're thinking, okay, can you make this simple, Colin? I know you're a financial advisor, and that's nearly impossible, but can you make it simple for me? Yes. I'm going to give you 3 keys, 3 critical components to enjoy happiness and fulfillment and freedom in retirement. Number 1, you must have freedom of time. Okay, I'll explain that more in our next segment. Number 2, you must have freedom of health. And number 3, you need freedom of wealth or resources. Freedom of time, freedom of health, freedom of wealth. And those are all 3 vital for you to have the happiness, the fulfillment, the freedom in retirement that you deserve and long for. And so in our next segment, we're going to dive right into the first of these great freedoms. I'm going to tell you a little bit about why Lord & Richards is a little bit different, how you can distinguish us from other advisors, because I think that's important, right? Because there's just a great pool of advisors out there, and you may be wondering, well, who do I go to for what type of information? So we're going to get into that, and I encourage you to hang on here, join us in our next segment, and we're going to talk about how you can enjoy freedom in retirement. But in the meantime, here's what I'd like you to do. Even as we're enjoying these segments, I want you to write down our numbers. I want you to make sure that you give us a call and you reach out to us. I'm going to give you those here in just a second so that we can sit down and have a complimentary retirement freedom review. That's going to enable you to make sure that you are prepared and you have all the pieces in place to enjoy freedom in retirement. I'll be right back in the next segment. Just pick up the phone and give us a call at 720-372-0400. Again, that's 720-372-0400. I'd love to chat with you about how you can achieve financial independence from a biblical point of view. Or just check us out on the web at lordandrichards.com. Hey folks, Colin Richards here, and we're back in another segment of the Lord and Richards Show. And we've begun a series on biblical retirement freedom and how you can enjoy that. And in our last segment, we talked about how Lord and Richards is a little bit different. First, as a biblically based firm, our advice is based on the timeless principles you find in the Word of God. In addition, we focus in on what it's going to take for you to really enjoy retirement freedom. And that's so much more than just managing your investments. And what we discovered is that there are 3 key freedoms that you need in order to truly find purpose, fulfillment, and joy. As stewards of the gift that God has given us, we need freedom of time, we need freedom of health, and we need freedom of wealth. Time, health, wealth. Freedom of time, freedom of health, freedom of wealth. It's very simple. But yet within each of those categories, there are challenges of such great complexity that they present overwhelmingly difficult obstacles. And unfortunately, the classic advice that we receive during our working years from our friends, family, and investment advisors is just all about stuffing our money into the market and watching it grow. And as a matter of fact, some well-meaning people on the radio and YouTube and so forth will just tell you, just stick it in the market, let it grow, you'll be fine. And that may be well and good for a phase that we call the accumulation phase of retirement. That's the phase when you're contributing to your 401k. By the way, only contribute to a 401k if you're getting a match. If you're not getting a match, then you need to contribute in other ways for more preferred tax treatment. But maybe you're socking away money in your IRAs during the working years. And so you lessen the effect of those inevitable market crashes because you're putting money in and you're not taking any out. But have you thought about this? Which problem is greater? To simply allow the money to accumulate over 10, 20, 30 years before you retire, and so build up a nest egg, enduring the inevitable downs of the market so that you can get the long-term growth. Or during your retirement years, trying to continue to do the same thing while taking withdrawals and then having to endure downturns that can take as much as 20, 30, 40, 50% of your portfolio historically. And so to enjoy these 3 freedoms, you're going to need what we call a specialist. And here's a general statement of our specialty at Lord & Richards. My team and I help you remove the financial obstacles that stand in the way of your time, health, wealth, and therefore your happiness. We help you remove those financial obstacles that are going to stand in the way. We're going to help you build a machine, if you will, that's going to clear the road so that you can have a clear path to retirement freedom. Let me give you an example of what I mean, and I'll take it from one of my many personal stories on these subjects. My dear wife and I have been married now for 33 years as of just a couple weeks ago. And we have enjoyed a lovely marriage, 4 wonderful kids who all love God and want to serve Him and honor their parents. It's more than I could have ever dreamed. And in the early days of our life, we had just one vehicle, just one car, and that was considered normal. Anybody remember that back years ago when most people only had one car? Well, I'm telling you my age by talking about that, but we just had the one vehicle. But once we had a child, my wife and I had somewhat competing schedules. Even though my wife was able to stay home as a music teacher, she had places to go. She had doctor's appointments for our little one and so forth. Well, somebody in our church had mercy on us. They were so kind, and they gave us not a brand new car, but a 10-year-old Honda Accord, 1987. And that was fantastic. It was just such a boon in our life with our one young child at the time. And so we began to enjoy a level of freedom we hadn't known. Well, one night I came home early with my son, and my wife was on another errand and was coming home a little later. And I got a phone call, and it was from the sheriff's department telling me that my wife had been in an accident. Now, rest easy. My wife is alive and well today, okay? But the challenges that created, as if you were able to see her vehicle completely destroyed, and yet somehow God preserved her life, but she did come away with having hit her head on the windshield, even with a seatbelt. She came away with severe arm and hand and elbow injuries as well as knee injuries. And she has worked through those problems to God's glory and to her praise and commendation. She is strong and healthy And all these years, in spite of having some really bad knees, my wife has just continued to ski. She grew up on skis. She can't help it. She saw a hill with moguls at Winter Park or someplace like that, and she just had to go for it, right? Well, that took its toll because the knees were already weakened, and so her joints began to show that, and she would need my help sometimes getting downstairs and so forth without a lot of pain. Well, it came time to see a doctor about getting that knee replaced, one of them. And did she go to a brain surgeon? Now, let me ask you a question. Are brain surgeons smart? Yeah, sure they are. They know a lot, right? Do they have a lot of depth of knowledge in the field of medicine and about the human body? Well, sure. But if that brain surgeon is smart, is he going to operate on your knee if his specialty is brain surgery? No. Exceptional person in their field, but the wrong person. Your Uncle Bob may have made his money in his business and have some money set aside, but that doesn't mean that he understands the problems and complexities of taking your nest egg that you've built over your entire lifetime and making sure that gets stretched and lasts throughout the rest of your lifetime, a retirement that could go 25, 30, I've seen even 35 years. So what are we going to do about that? Well, we want to see a specialist. And I was so grateful when we found a fantastic specialist. Shout out to Dr. Foran of Panorama. Did an amazing job, and my wife was on skis with a partial knee replacement in just about 2 months. It was amazing. So when we see a specialist, things tend to go better, don't they? When we're consulting our friends and family, it may not. And so let's begin with the first specialty that you're going to require in order to develop what we call freedom of time. This is our first key area. If you want to enjoy happiness, joy, fulfillment, and freedom, you're going to have to get rid of your job, right? Now, some of you love your job. You absolutely plan to work until you drop. That's fantastic. But let me ask you the question, do you plan to work until you drop because you have to financially? Or does it feel a little better if you're financially free, but are doing it simply because you love it? Well, I think my audiences all agree with me. Yeah, we don't want to work till we drop or whatever, our 80s or 90s, because we have to. We want to do that if we love it. And if not, we want to have the freedom of choice to leave that. And so we need freedom of time to do the things that we love with the people that we love for those reasons that give us purpose and fulfillment. And all the more if the reasons that give us purpose and fulfillment are to honor God and to serve others, as we talked about in our last segment. So what's in the way? It's your work. It's your job. It's your career. Well, there's a solution to that. Okay? To have freedom of time, you have something that you need that will take the place of your obstacle, which is your work, your job, and your career. And so we're going to talk about that in our very next segment, but let's pause and get some numbers here. I'm going to give you some numbers on how to contact us, because if you've been putting this off, and I've talked to some wonderful people that have been coming into our offices lately, and we have offices in Highlands Ranch and in Plano, Texas, and if you're out of the area, we can connect with you via Zoom. We would love to sit down with you and help you understand the key principles that will set you free in retirement, and they're not simply to pick good investments, although that's part of it. So we'll be right back in our next segment, and here's a little bit of information to help you develop what we call a retirement freedom review with us. Just pick up the phone and give us a call at 720-372-0400. Again, that's 720-372-0400. I'd love to chat with you about how you can achieve financial independence from a biblical point of view. Or just check us out on the web at lordandrichards.com. Hey folks, this is Colin Richards, and once again, I'm delighted to be talking to you today about how to enjoy biblical retirement freedom. At Lord and Richards, we not only base our advice on sound, tested principles of finance, but also on the eternal principles we find in God's Word. And when it comes to obtaining freedom, we're really talking about having the freedom to bring joy, purpose, and fulfillment in your life without having to necessarily go into work to pay for it, right? And the first of those freedoms is freedom of time. I know people who, something that they're really looking forward to in retirement is going on more mission trips, going and helping missionaries, right? And yet their job may be holding them back. Now, there are some things that you can do now to begin doing that. I encourage people to practice retirement for about 10 years before. Start figuring out the things that you really are going to enjoy and love doing. And what's in the way is your work, your job, your career that may not necessarily be the thing you want to do your whole life. And so what we do at Lord & Richards is we specialize in removing those obstacles so that you can do these amazing things with the resources that God has entrusted to you. So what are we going to need really to replace the income that we got from our job? Well, we're going to need a new abundant income source. And notice I said abundant. I don't want you to feel tight, constrained. These are the things that people tell me when I ask, what does retirement freedom mean to you? It means not feeling tight. I can go out and if I want to do something for somebody I love or give something to my church or to a friend or to family in need, I've got the freedom to do that, right? And so abundant income means more than just meeting the bare necessities of life, as Baloo sings about in the Jungle Story movie, right? Not just the bare necessities, right? But we're going to go beyond that, and we're going to get into fulfillment and joy through abundance of income. Now, be warned, there are many sources of income, but not all are abundant. And here's another word, not all are guaranteed. Now, you might be saying, if you're the naturally skeptical person, well, there are no guarantees in life except death and taxes, right? Well, that's true. But when I say guaranteed, I mean somebody is willing to promise you and put themselves on the line that this income is going to be forever. And I'll talk about who those people are that are willing to do that. You know them well, and you may be already enjoying some sources of guaranteed income. But let's start with the non-guaranteed sources, and these may or may not be abundant. So I call them non-guaranteed, non-abundant tools that maybe are better used as a supplement to your standard of living in retirement as opposed to depending on them, right? It doesn't mean they're wrong. It doesn't mean that they're immoral, right? It just means that they may not be the very best thing to depend on. So think of them as supplements. Let's start with the first obvious one that people tell me. Well, of course, I'm going to, Colin, take money out of my 401k, my IRA, my other portfolio. Right? That's fantastic. That's great. How are you going to do that? Well, I've been taught the rule of 4%, many people will say. And I go back to the 90s and William Bengen's work on that. And he was doing that for the benefit of his clients and others. And he said, hey, without pensions, we need to figure out how much money can we safely withdraw from our portfolio and not run out of money before we run out of life. Good idea. And his research, based on the time frames that he studied, was about 4%. So whether you have $1 or if you have $10 million, 4% out of that. Let's take $1 million, not because Lord & Richards only works with millionaires, but because it's easy for me to do some math, and some of our clients have obtained that and more. So if you had $1 million and you could live on 4%, that's about $40,000 a year. Do you feel like a millionaire? Well, most of us don't, especially for those of us living in more expensive areas. $40,000 in income doesn't sound great. Now, of course, you can add that to your Social Security. It starts to add up, and if you're blessed with some other sources. But let's just take that $40,000. Now, what happens if the market comes along and cuts that in half? That $1 million is now $500,000, and your $40,000 withdrawal is now an 8% withdrawal. Did you know that there's nobody credible encouraging you to take 8% of your portfolio out a year as your income? That'll never last over a 20, 30, 35-year retirement. But here's the bad news. When you're taking money out and the market is already taking money out, it's what I call dollar cost ravaging. You've heard of dollar cost averaging, right? Slowly adding money to your 401k. Well, this is dollar cost ravaging. Withdrawing when your portfolio is down doubles down on your losses and makes it that much harder to recover. People will have a lot of willingness to take risk, of course, when the market's up, and they'll share with me, Colin, we've endured many, many times, and I will simply ask the question, well, did you endure that market collapse while you were withdrawing or while you were saving? You see, so much easier to recover while you're withdrawing. And now, because of these massive downsides that we've seen in the market over the last couple of decades, economists and financial planners and teachers, PhDs in PhDs in economics, as well as researchers in retirement and income are telling us, no, it's really 2.5% to 3%. Oh my goodness. Go back to your $1 million, that's only $25,000 to $30,000 a year. Does that feel like enough? Well, let me give you hope. You don't have to withdraw portfolio in the same way. You don't have to depend upon portfolio withdrawals the way people have always done it. Because the people who were doing that in 2007, 8, and 9, when the market really collapsed, and some of you remember that, their 401ks became 201ks, they went back to work. I talked to many of them. That's not something you should ever have to experience. And at Lord & Richards, we're going to teach you how to rely on guaranteed, abundant income sources. It's going to start with a phone call and what we call a retirement freedom review. So I'm going to give you that information in a moment, but don't delay. And we'll be back in future segments with those guaranteed, abundant income sources. Pick up the phone. Just pick up the phone and give us a call at 720-372-0400. Again, that's 720-372-0400. I'd love to chat with you about how you can achieve financial independence from a biblical point of view. Or just check us out on the web at lordandrichards.com.
Investment advisory services offered through Lord & Richards Wealth Management, LLC.